The search for Cleopatra's tomb leads a scientist to an extraordinary discovery. For many years she sought to find the tomb of Queen Cleopatra, until the search led her to another discovery. The Egyptian archaeologist Kathleen Martinez made an exceptional discovery in the search for Queen Cleopatra, after finding two mummies of senior officials in a temple in the Delta. Queen Cleopatra was the last ruler of the Ptolemaic kingdom in Egypt and one of the most famous pharaohs, but her tomb has not been found for 2,000 years, since her death, so archaeologists traditionally search for evidence close to central Alexandria, where she was born and ruled, according to what the newspaper published. British Daily Express. But Dr. Martinez, who dedicated her life to finding Cleopatra's tomb, is convinced it lies 30 miles outside the city, in the ancient temple site of Taposiris Magna, until she discovers Egypt's most important, high-profile mummies, adding weight to her theory. After a baffling process to remove slabs of limestone blocking the summit, a small hole appeared and Dr. Martinez took a look inside to find a mummy, describing the situation from the inside saying, "Undisturbed for thousands of years and in a poor state of preservation because water had seeped into the tomb, the pair were covered originally with gold leaf, a luxury reserved only for the most elite members of society, which means they may have interacted personally with Cleopatra." Describing the discovery as exceptional, Egyptologist Dr. Glenn Gogino said, "The way the mummies were mummified, especially those originally covered in gold leaf, shows that these were high-ranking people who could afford a good burial in nice materials. And then that begins to help us build a profile of the social structures of the time. Kathleen must find members of the more privileged end of society in this tomb. The more she discovers, the more she will be able to know them. But she faces some problems, which is that no texts were found in the mummies, so there are still no names and job titles," explaining, "So nowadays it is a little difficult to say much about them. Perhaps the mummies were male and female priests who played a role key in maintaining the power of the legendary Egyptian queen and her lover, Mark Antony." Also found at the site were 200 coins bearing Cleopatra's name and her face, which would have been pressed based on Cleopatra's direct instructions and her great-grandfather's statue. Despite the fact that researchers have been excavating the site since 2005, only a tiny percentage of the vast site has been excavated, which means Dr. Martinez is steps away from discovering the Queen's tomb, especially after seeing so many clues. Search and Ali. It was completed. The discovery of an archaeological tunnel carved into the rock at a depth of 13 meters underground, west of Alexandria. The tunnel is newly discovered. This discovery will rewrite history as we did not know it before. A long-lost tomb. The discovery of a mysterious hidden for centuries. The mysterious life of the mysterious Queen Cleopatra, and the secrets reveals for the first time inside closed rooms about the life of Queen Cleopatra. And Dr. Kathleen Martins succeeded in uncovering the tunnel during excavation work in the area of the Temple of Taposiris Magna, west of Alexandria. The tunnel is about 1,305 meters long and about 2 meters high. 2 heads made of alabaster were found near the temple, one of which was of a person from the Ptolemaic era, and the other is likely to be a statue of the Sphinx. For her part, Dr. Kathleen Martins, head of the mission, explained that preliminary studies indicate that the architectural design of the discovered tunnel is very similar to the design of the Eubalinos tunnel in Greece, but it is longer than it, describing it as an engineering miracle. She added that during the excavations and archaeological survey of the tunnel, a part of the tunnel sunk under the waters of the Mediterranean was revealed, and a number of pottery vessels and ceramic jars were also found under the mud sediments, in addition to a rectangular block of limestone. Martinez revealed archaeological evidence confirming the existence of part of the foundations of the Temple of Taposiris Magna submerged underwater, which the mission is currently working to uncover, pointing out that according to scientific sources, no less than 23 earthquakes hit the Egyptian coast between the years 320 AD and 1303 AD, which led to the collapse part of the Temple of Taposiris Magna and its sinking under the waves. This tunnel is not the first discovery of the mission, as it had previously found many important artifacts inside the temple, including coins bearing the images and names of Queen Cleopatra and Alexander the Great, a number of headless statues, and statues of the goddess Isis, in addition to inscriptions and statues. Semicircles of different shapes and sizes. The mission also discovered a network of tunnels extending from Lake King Mariot to the Mediterranean Sea, and 16 burials inside rock-cut tombs that were commonly used in the Greek and Roman eras, in addition to a number of mummies that highlight the features of the mummification process during the Greek and Roman eras. For 15 years, which is the age of the excavations in the temple, the mission seeks to discover the tomb of Queen Cleopatra, where it is believed that Cleopatra and Mark Antony were buried inside the temple of Isis and Osiris in the Top Osiris Magna area, at a site 45 kilometers west of Alexandria. Queen Cleopatra is one of the most important kings of pharaonic Egypt, as she was the richest king of the Mediterranean, in addition to being the most influential woman of that era. As is the case with most history accounts that have always been written in favor of the victor, Cleopatra has a set of widespread myths, and therefore it is time to separate fact from fiction and mention the truth about Queen Cleopatra, as explained by the richest site in 10 points. During her life that spanned less than 4 decades, Cleopatra killed many members of her family, and it seems brutal when knowing that she did so to preserve her safety and her throne, and many documentaries show Cleopatra that she had a cold and murderous heart. But contrary to popular belief, many historians agree that Cleopatra only resorted to murder when it proved absolutely necessary and that her family would have killed her if she had not done so first. According to the accounts, Cleopatra was deeply saddened by the death of her lover Marcus Antonius, in addition to her fear of presenting her as a spoil of victory for the victorious Romans, so she killed herself by a snake bite. However, many researchers have confirmed that this method of death may not, in fact, be accurate and that there is very little archaeological and documentary evidence to help find the indisputable truth and doubt, and what denies that story is that the Egyptians were known for their great knowledge of medicine and poison treatment. Scientists such as Christoph Schaefer and toxicologist Dietrich Meeps have another theory, where I claim that the great Egyptian queen poisoned herself using a mixture of opium, hemlock and wolf's strangle, a deadly mixture that is painless and fast-acting. Although everyone loves the romantic character in the story of Cleopatra and Antony, and she was indeed deeply grieved at his death, historians believe that there were other motives that led to her death, and it is likely that the fall of Egypt into the hands of the Romans was the real reason behind her suicide. Cleopatra predicted that it would be presented as a spoil of victory to the Romans, and that it would be a kind of humiliation for her as the Queen of Egypt, also that she turned from a state of boasting and wealth to a state of bankruptcy in which she could not bear to live in, and that made her commit suicide, and thus we discover that her suicide was not a result of imaginary romantic motives, but rather motives more realistic. Once again, romantic sentiments prevail that Cleopatra was buried with her lover, Marcus Antonius. There is a division among experts on this subject. There is an opinion that Cleopatra built a tomb for herself in Alexandria, and the other opinion believes that the two lovers were buried together in a temple. In fact, this myth will not be proven right or wrong until the alleged tomb of Queen Cleopatra, now in the depths of the water, is found next to the ruins of what remains of the ancient city of Alexandria. Historians criticized Cleopatra and described her as a frivolous queen who spends a lot on her beauty and hair, and that she was using her beauty and not her personality and intellect in order to obtain anything, and indeed Cleopatra cared a lot about her beauty and hair and was wearing expensive clothes and in fact took 50% of the income of the gross domestic product of Egypt for her account, but she also ruled Egypt in a very good way, besides that she was a serious and intelligent person, according to historical documents. She carried out several major plans for the public interest during a time, and Alexandria became a splendor and the most famous city in her time. Many people believe that Cleopatra used her beauty only in her rule of Egypt, and this is of course not true, and the time she used her beauty was in order to benefit her or her kingdom, and this was clearly a deliberate strategy. There are several other cases where Cleopatra showed unparalleled ingenuity as a political and strategic thinker, such as thinking about making her son Ptolemy a strong ruler in the future, in addition to her ability to predict the outcome of wars. Therefore, all historical and archaeological evidence indicates that Cleopatra had excellent mental strength, and that the image in which Cleopatra appears as stupid and relies only on her beauty is completely wrong. Cleopatra was not beautiful, at least not according to the standard definition of beauty as she was presented in this image. The basic perception about Cleopatra's beauty came because of the idea that she managed to seduce two of the most powerful men of her time, Julius Caesar and Marcus Antonius, but Cleopatra appears in coins that bear her image with a sharp chin and a somewhat pointed nose, along with an eccentric expression that cannot express beauty. Cleopatra was smart and strong, and these qualities are not associated with beauty, and it is possible that these reasons are what seduced Julius Caesar and Marcus Antonius. Although Cleopatra assumed the throne of Egypt at the age of 17, she lacked experience, education and skills. Therefore, in line with its origin as being from the Ptolemaic family, a family that always cares about education and learning, so much effort was made to educate it. Cleopatra learned languages, science and war strategies. Cleopatra gave women rights in her kingdom unlike many other large kingdoms at the time, and she collected taxes and redistributed them in the economy in a measured way, in addition to promoting trade and education. Many people, especially those sympathetic to Roman history, imagine that Cleopatra was a prostitute and a vessel for sex and maintained relations with many men, but the truth is the opposite. That the matter had fallen out with Marcus Antonius after that and developed into a real passion. Cleopatra was not Egyptian but a descendant of the Greek Macedonian dynasty that began with Ptolemy I. This dynasty ruled Egypt in the period from 30 to 323 BC, and although most of its rulers remained to a large extent retaining Greek ideas and culture, Cleopatra was different, and she made great efforts in her youth to study and understand Egyptian culture, so she might know that one day she would become Queen of Egypt. Cleopatra learned the Egyptian language in order to become the only one in her family to do so. The Egyptians loved Cleopatra as a result of the security and prosperity achieved during her reign, and it is really unfortunate that Cleopatra is the last king of the pharaohs.